perhaps then the Prime Minister should have simply brought forward a Flat Earth Bill to assert that the earth is flat and the Home Office is empowered to simply push people and unwanted asylum seekers off the edge of it and into the cold vastness of space. Now, it might come as a surprise and perhaps even a disappointment to some elements of the Conservative backbenchers, but the earth is not flat. The earth is round, and if you keep pushing people in one direction, eventually they will come back to you.
Speaker, last week my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow Central, compared the Home Secretary to Humpty Dumpty in Alice in Wonderland, who uses words to mean just what he chooses them to mean. I wonder if perhaps the Prime Minister could be compared to the Red Queen who believed 6 impossible things before breakfast, that Brexit has been a success, that Britain is a soft power superpower, that the Scottish Parliament is the most powerful wee devolved assembly in the entire world, that we can reach net zero while abandoning net zero policies, or that this bill is actually going to stop irregular arrivals in the United Kingdom, or sixthly, that his party is actually going to win the next election. But I think even for that side of the House, that is too unbelievable. They don't think this bill is going to work, and they don't think they're going to win the next election. And the bill isn't going to work because it fails under the crushing weight of its own internal contradictions. Rwanda is deemed to be a safe country, desirable even as a place for asylum seekers to be processed and to remain. And the former Home Secretary didn't take my intervention earlier on. I wanted to ask her, if Rwanda is such a desirable place to be deported to, why on earth should it be a deterrent? How is it going to have a deterrent effect if the government is saying this is a wonderful, safe and secure place for you to go? Maybe more people will come to the United Kingdom in the hope of being sent to Rwanda.
Because I think he must recognise that Rwanda has successfully resettled over 130,000 people, and that's through international institutions and norms.
Yes, so I think I've just heard the former Home Secretary encouraging more people to come to the United Kingdom so that they can be safely settled in Rwanda. And the Republic of Rwanda is to be trusted to fulfil its obligations under the Rwanda Treaty because the treaty is binding under customary international law. But the same bill grants the UK government derogations from that corpus of international law and instructs the courts to ignore it. And the bill is supposed to slash costs to the taxpayer of housing asylum seekers in UK hotels, but the government has already paid Rwanda hundreds of millions of pounds without a single flight taking off. And the price for this performative weak bill is a weakening of the courts and judicial system, a weakening of the UK's standing in the world, and indeed a weakening of the entire system of international law. Because if it's okay for the UK government to derogate from its international obligations and commitments when it suits, then how can the UK object to other countries, Russia or China or anywhere else for that matter, when they flaunt the rule of international law? The bill is supposed to be an assertion of parliamentary sovereignty, as if Parliament asserting particular statements simply makes them true. Well, to pick up on the theme from the member for Rutherglen who spoke earlier, perhaps then the Prime Minister should have simply brought forward a Flat Earth Bill to assert that the earth is flat and the Home Office is empowered to simply push people and unwanted asylum seekers off the edge of it and into the cold vastness of space. Now, it might come as a surprise and perhaps even a disappointment to some elements of the Conservative backbenchers, but the earth is not flat. The earth is round, and if you keep pushing people in one direction, eventually they will come back to you. Now, it's important in all of this, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be clear that despite us debating the safety of Rwanda Bill, very little of this debate is actually about the safety of Rwanda. In 2018, I had the huge privilege of visiting Rwanda with the CPA. It's a beautiful country, it has huge potential, and the people there have had to live through horrors and overcome unimaginable difficulties. But for wealthy tourists and those who fly in to go on safari and stay in nice hotels, Rwanda is indeed a safe and welcoming country. But for citizens who speak up too loudly with questions about the regime, who perhaps ask why international observers have been unable to report that presidential elections have been free or fair, or perhaps people who belong to the LGBT+ community in that country, or indeed if there are Rwandan citizens who live in London under the protection of the Metropolitan Police because they're being sought by their own country's intelligence services, perhaps they might not find it as safe and welcoming. And whatever the bill might say, the UK Supreme Court has made a finding of fact that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda are at risk of refoulement, and simply saying they're not doesn't change that fact. Really, though, the question of the safety of Rwanda is a distraction. The very principle or idea of forcing people to move to another country, to any other country, against their will, should be enough to oppose the government's policies. People seeking asylum have chosen to come here to the United Kingdom for good reason, perhaps because they have friends or family, or perhaps simply, yes, because they do speak the language. But if someone has chosen to seek asylum here, they should be assessed here, and if their claim is valid, they should be allowed to remain. And if their claim isn't valid, then by definition, it ought to be safe to return them to their country of origin. Perhaps the most remarkable thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that this time last week, this bill didn't even exist. In less than 7 days, the Prime Minister has brought himself, and possibly his government and party, to a crisis point entirely of their own making. It's a bill that nobody wants and nobody likes. It's another creaking internal Conservative contradiction. Too extreme for the mainstream of the party, not extreme enough for the Red Wallers, the ERG and the Maastricht rebels who simply can't get enough of the sweet dopamine hit that comes with rebelling against the party and getting invited onto all kinds of podcasts. Some of them have been at it since the 1990s and they just have to keep getting more extreme in their rebellions to achieve the same hit. Well, Scotland wants none of it, Madam Deputy Speaker. The constituents I hear from in Glasgow North, and the constituents, indeed, who are refugees, want to play a full and active part in our society and economy. If the government wants bills that will change the actual reality of the situation, they can devolve the power over immigration to the Scottish Parliament, or they can give us the chance to choose a better, fairer future that respects human rights and global citizenship by becoming an independent country in a referendum.
Richard Graham.